They were handed small glasses filled with a bright liquid they rarely saw at breakfast, and its color alone made it look more like a remedy than a drink. And when they were told to have it in the morning, some assumed it was given for health rather than taste, because in their experience, strong colored liquids were often linked to medicine. And as they lifted the glass with quiet caution, a simple question formed among them, wondering why a prison camp would serve something that looked like treatment instead of ordinary rations. The morning meal followed its usual structure, with bread, simple portions, and the predictable rhythm that defined most days inside the camp. And because routine rarely changed, the men approached breakfast with the calm attention that comes from habit rather than expectation, carrying their trays to the tables without looking for surprises. On this particular morning, however, a small glass stood beside the bread ration, filled with a bright liquid whose color immediately separated it from the usual tones of camp food, because most drinks they received were pale, dark, or muted, while this one carried a vivid shade that caught the eye before it reached the table. The liquid was not steaming like coffee and not thin like water, and its appearance alone made several men slow their movements, since unfamiliar items inside a controlled environment often required quiet evaluation before acceptance, and evaluation had become part of their daily thinking. Color matters in food recognition, and strong color sometimes signals flavor, sometimes preservation, and sometimes treatment. And in wartime experience, many brightly colored liquids were associated with tonics or medical mixtures rather than ordinary meals, which shaped their first assumptions without anyone speaking them aloud. They sat down and looked at the glasses placed near each tray, and a few lifted them slightly to see how the light passed through the liquid, noticing a faint thickness and a cloudy brightness that suggested it was neither plain water nor tea, and this visual information only deepened their curiosity. No explanation was offered with the serving, and the guards continued their routine distribution without comment, and this silence left interpretation to the prisoners themselves, who had learned to observe carefully before acting, since information inside camps often arrived slowly or not at all. Some assumed it might be a nutritional supplement, because wartime systems often introduced vitamin drinks to maintain health, and this assumption felt reasonable, especially in a setting where efficiency and medical prevention mattered to camp management. Others wondered whether it was meant to prevent illness, since certain liquids in their past experience were given during fatigue or seasonal sickness, and memory influences expectation, especially when encountering something unfamiliar. The smell reached them next, carrying a fresh and slightly sharp scent unlike coffee or soup, and scent can trigger recognition quickly. Yet for many, the smell did not connect clearly to a familiar source, leaving them between curiosity and caution rather than certainty. They did not refuse it and did not rush to drink it, but allowed it to sit on the tray as they began eating their bread, watching how others reacted, because shared environments often create shared cues, and observing others helps reduce uncertainty without direct questions. One or two men finally raised the glass and tasted a small amount, not as a bold action, but as a practical test, and their reaction remained neutral, neither alarmed nor enthusiastic, which signaled that the liquid was safe even if it remained unexplained. Still, the question lingered quietly across the tables, not spoken loudly, but present in their thoughts, because when something appears outside the pattern of routine, the mind seeks to place it into a known category, and until that placement happens, the object remains a small mystery inside an otherwise predictable day. As more men decided to taste the bright drink, the reaction unfolded gradually rather than all at once, because food inside the camp was approached with practicality, and practicality encouraged small tests instead of quick conclusions, and this careful approach shaped how they experienced anything unfamiliar. The first full sip surprised some of them, not because it was unpleasant, but because it carried a sharp freshness that contrasted strongly with the usual muted flavors of camp meals. And the taste combined a mild sweetness with a noticeable acidity that lingered briefly, creating a sensation closer to fresh fruit than to any drink they normally received. This flavor did not match coffee, did not resemble soup, and did not carry the heaviness of milk. And because it resisted easy comparison, the mind searched for references, since understanding often depends on linking new sensations to known experiences. A few recognized that it resembled citrus. Those citrus fruits were not common in their recent wartime diets, and limited exposure makes recognition slower, especially when memory has not encountered taste for a long time, and war had narrowed many diets across Europe, reducing variety. They noticed that the drink felt refreshing rather than filling, and this difference suggested it served a purpose other than calories alone. Because most camp foods focused on sustenance, while this drink seemed aimed at something lighter, possibly health-related. Some men began to suspect it might contain vitamins, since military systems often paid attention to nutrition to maintain work capacity and reduce illness. And this reasoning fit the logic of organized camp management rather than generosity. When a guard eventually mentioned in passing that it was orange juice, the explanation arrived without ceremony, spoken as if the item required no introduction, and this casual tone indicated that the drink was a normal part of local diets rather than a special ration. Hearing the name clarified the source immediately for those familiar with oranges, and once the fruit connection was known, the taste made sense because citrus carries a recognizable balance of sweet and sour that matches what they had just experienced. They learned that oranges were widely available in parts of the United States, and that juice was commonly served at breakfast, and this detail added another small piece to their understanding of regional food habits, shaped by agriculture and climate rather than preference alone. No one treated the drink as luxury, and no one treated it as medicine after that explanation, because knowledge replaced speculation, and speculation fades quickly once a clear answer is given. The glasses were finished calmly, and the moment passed without discussion. Yet the experience remained in memory as an example of how everyday items in one country can feel unusual in another, especially when wartime conditions limit exposure to variety. By the end of the meal, the orange juice had shifted from mystery to understood routine. And this quiet transition illustrated how quickly unfamiliar things settle into normality once their origin and purpose become clear, leaving behind only the awareness that daily life differs from place to place in ways not always visible at first glance. After the drink was identified as orange juice, the curiosity did not disappear completely, because knowing what something is does not always explain why it appears regularly. And in a structured environment like a POW camp, purpose often matters as much as identity. The men began to view the juice less as a surprise and more as part of system, since organized camps followed nutritional planning designed to keep prisoners capable of work and stable in health. And this planning often reflected broader military guidelines rather than individual choice. They were aware that long conflicts had taught many armies the importance of vitamins, especially to prevent fatigue and illness, and citrus fruits had gained a reputation for supporting health, which made the presence of orange juice logically connected to nutrition rather than preference. Some prisoners remembered earlier periods of the war, when fresh fruit had been rare, and recalling that contrast highlighted how availability depends heavily on geography, because regions with large citrus production could treat such items as ordinary rather than special. This realization helped them see that the drink was not a sign of special treatment, but a reflection of local food systems, and separating local abundance from intention allowed them to interpret the situation realistically. They also noticed that the guards treated the juice as routine, pouring and distributing it without emphasis. And this neutral handling reinforced the idea that it belonged to everyday breakfast rather than to medical care or morale building. The brightness of the drink, which at first suggested medicine, now appeared simply as the natural color of fruit, and this shift showed how perception changes once information fills the gaps left by uncertainty. A few men adjusted to the taste quickly and drank it without hesitation when served again, while others remained neutral toward it. Yet neutrality itself signaled acceptance, because rejection usually follows strong dislike rather than mild unfamiliarity. In captivity, practical thinking often replaced emotional reaction, and this mindset helped them process differences calmly, placing each new detail into a broader understanding of how the surrounding society functioned. They recognized that American breakfast included items shaped by regional agriculture, and that what seemed unusual to them was likely ordinary to civilians nearby, and this awareness added nuance to their view of daily life outside the camp. The juice became another example of how war places people inside systems influenced by geography and supply chains, and seeing these influences helped them interpret experiences without attaching symbolic meaning to simple logistics. By this stage, the orange juice no longer raised questions at the table, because its role had been explained through observation and context, and once context exists, curiosity settles into quiet understanding, allowing routine to continue without distraction. As the days continued and the same small glasses appeared beside their breakfast portions from time to time, the sense of novelty around the drink faded naturally, because repetition turns unfamiliar items into expected ones, and expectation reduces the attention the mind gives to small details. The men no longer examined the color or lifted the glass to study it against the light, and instead they treated it as another part of the tray, drinking in the same calm manner as water or coffee, and this shift in behavior showed how quickly perception adapts once uncertainty is removed. Routine inside the camp shaped most reactions, because routine conserves mental energy, and conserving energy mattered in an environment where predictability provided stability, and stable thinking helped maintain morale better than constant evaluation of minor differences. They noticed that the juice often appeared in modest portions rather than large servings, which aligned with controlled distribution rather than abundance. And this consistency reinforced the idea that it was planned nutritionally rather than offered as a comfort. Some quietly appreciated the refreshing taste during warmer mornings, while others remained indifferent. Yet both reactions settled into neutrality, and neutrality is often the final stage of adaptation when something neither disrupts nor excites daily life. The guards continued to treat the drink without comment, and this ongoing normalcy confirmed that citrus juice was part of standard breakfast culture in the region, and cultural habits often reveal themselves through what people do without explanation rather than what they describe in detail. Over time, the prisoners placed the juice into the same mental category as other local foods they had encountered, items shaped by agriculture and climate, and recognizing these patterns helped them build a clearer understanding of how civilian diets differed from their own past experience. They did not attach symbolic meaning to the drink and did not discuss it beyond practical remarks, because captivity teaches people to focus on what affects their situation directly, and small dietary differences rarely altered their broader reality. Still, each small adaptation contributed quietly to their awareness of the country around them, showing that daily life in America followed rhythms tied to local resources, and these rhythms continued even during wartime. By this stage, the orange juice had fully joined the background of camp routine, no longer a question and no longer a curiosity, but simply another predictable element of the morning meal, illustrating how quickly the unusual becomes ordinary when it appears often enough. In this steady pattern, the drink lost its mystery but left behind a small piece of understanding about regional food culture, And that understanding, though minor, added to the broader picture they were slowly forming of the world beyond their earlier expectations. As the orange juice settled fully into routine, it stopped drawing attention altogether, and this quiet disappearance from notice revealed something about how the mind works in confinement. Because when life is structured and repetitive, only differences stand out, and once those differences become familiar, they lose their power to distract. Looking back, the experience had never truly been about a drink, but about encountering a food culture shaped by geography they had not lived in before, because citrus fruits grow where climate allows, and climate influences what becomes normal at a breakfast table. And these agricultural realities shape daily habits more than personal preference. They understood that regions with large orange production could treat juice as ordinary, and that transporting and serving it regularly reflected strong supply systems. And this practical explanation fit the larger pattern they were observing about American logistics and food distribution. This realization did not create admiration and did not create resentment, but it added a neutral layer of understanding, and neutral understanding often builds a clearer picture than strong reaction, especially in situations where interpretation matters more than emotion. Food had become one of the quiet ways they learned about their surroundings, alongside noticing farmland, rail lines, and local routines. And these observations helped them map the environment mentally even when they could not move freely within it. They also recognized that wartime life does not look identical everywhere, and that distance from battlefield allows some regions to maintain normal dietary habits. And this awareness helped explain why certain foods appeared regularly despite global conflict. No one viewed the juice as generosity, and no one viewed it as medicine anymore, because its role had been clarified through repetition and context. And once something is understood, it returns to the background of daily life. In captivity, maintaining calm interpretation helped preserve mental balance. And focusing on practical explanations rather than symbolic meaning supported steady thinking. And steady thinking mattered more than strong opinions about small matters. The orange juice ultimately became just another item shaped by the land that produced it. And recognizing this linked the drink to agriculture rather than intention, and that link grounded their understanding in reality. By the end, the experience remained as a simple example of how everyday life differs from place to place, showing that what feels unusual in one country may be entirely routine in another. And this quiet lesson added to their growing awareness of the world beyond their past experience without changing their present situation. In the end, the small glass of orange juice did not change their schedule, did not alter their rations, and did not affect the rules that shaped their days, yet offered a brief glimpse into how daily life in another country followed patterns shaped by land, climate, and supply rather than by wartime symbolism. What first looked like medicine had turned out to be breakfast, and this simple clarification reminded them that unfamiliarity often comes from distance, not intention, and that many differences between countries are practical before they are cultural. For the prisoners, the experience became another quiet example of how observation leads to understanding and how understanding reduces uncertainty. And in confinement, reducing uncertainty helped maintain a steady state of mind. The drink eventually lost all novelty and blended into routine. And this blending showed how quickly people adapt when explanations replace assumptions, turning questions into ordinary facts. What remained was not the taste of citrus, but the awareness that everyday life outside their past experience continued according to local resources and habits, and that these habits persisted even during global conflict. And so the memory of that first bright glass settled into the background as a small lesson in difference, showing that even in captivity, simple encounters with unfamiliar customs could add pieces to a clearer picture of the world beyond the fence, a world shaped as much by geography as by history. Thank you for spending this time here. If these quiet, true World War II stories matter to you, subscribing helps this channel continue.